All right, so here we go. Good morning again, everybody. Diamond Sutra part 4, I believe. So, which means we have 2 left, July and August. Happy June also. So you may have noticed this month's material we chanted was different. And what I did this month, obviously I'm picking the material I'm planning to talk about. So what we have this month, just to tell you where we're going, we have got the same beginning sections 1 through 5, which are, thus have I heard, went out, fed himself. Subhuti stood up and said, how should we pacify our minds? The Buddha said, thus. Subhuti didn't get it. Said instead, I assure you will one we joyfully await your answer. So Buddha starts to answer. And we spent quite a bit of time in the first 2 weeks talking about that. And then if a bodhisattva retains the notion of an ego, a personality, a being, and a like, he is not a bodhisattva. That's what we talked about last time. And then continues into section 6. And then we've got sections 12 through 16. 11. Did I not have 11? I thought I had 11 should be in here as well, and it's not. Unfortunately, I've deleted 11. But those are sections that, and then 19, 24, 26 have some of this too, and 32 has some of this too. These are places where it talks about stupas. Stupa shows up a couple of times. Anywhere where the sutra is, anywhere where bodhisattvas are, the teaching is propounded, that should be regarded as a stupa and regarded with reverence and obeisance and so forth. It is also where there's a lot of language about receiving, retaining, reading, and reciting, or variations thereof, which include understanding and writing and so forth. So there's that, which is, and then the name of the sutra and carry the sutra forward. So that's the stuff that can land. And I'm sure there is a piece of this in there, but that can land as a evangelistic kind of approach. There is more in there, so I want to talk about that. And then also in here, we talk about the paramitas a little bit. So I'm going to talk about paramitas. So the stupa and how that works here. We'll start there. I think that was in section 11, which I deleted, but it also shows up further on. You can find, you remember chanting it, I'm sure. It's kind of a strange thing to stick in the stupa. So stupa, first of all, what is a stupa? The root word, as I understand it, means something like top or crown. So stupa is the top or a crown. And in the ancient days, in the Indian subcontinent, the broad area as it then was, what would happen is somebody would die, the body would be burnt, there'd be a pile of wood, logs put together, the body would be placed on it and it would be burned. And this obviously for those who could afford to do such things. And then the body would be covered with just a pile of dirt. The ashes would be just covered. So that was a stupa, it's just like burying that. But it obviously evolved. So when Buddha died, actually before Buddha died, he asked, and I can't remember where this is, but it is written down somewhere with the stories about Buddha. One of his disciples came to him and said, "So, boss, what do we do when you die? I'm sure you need to be like buried or something, but you're kind of a special dude. What should we do?" And the Buddha got out his robe and just kind of folded his robe up. He folded it into kind of a square. They put it on the ground. And then they carry around their feeding bowls, right? The begging bowl. And he put the robe on the ground and he turned the bowl upside down over the top. So just do that. It's kind of like a stupa, ashes. Dirt, right? But the symbolism there is going to be a cube with a semicircle on the top of it. We'll talk about it in a minute. So then the Buddha died. They bought this huge pile of wood, like a Viking champion on the boat going out to sea kind of thing. Burned it, and burned the corpse. And then, of course, you rummage through the ashes afterwards looking for little bone fragments and teeth, the relics. And then, in theory, all the monastics, all the arhats and the disciples, they were all hanging off, sort of well behaved on the side, but the laity were running around saying, no, he was, so the Shakya said, he was one of us. He was born, he's one of our people. We should have these ashes. And then I think the name of the group is the Malas, which is the geography where he did most of his teaching. No, he was in our territory. We should have the ashes here. And altogether, there were a bunch of these people. So they argued, and in the end, they divided. They ended up with 8 piles of ashes for 8 groups of people. And then there was a 9th, I can't remember the reason for the 9th, and the 10th was just the original pile where the burning happened. So they created these 10 separate piles, 10 separate stupas. And then you've got all these little relics. So at that time, when Buddhism as it became first arose, they didn't have statues of Buddha, they didn't have art, they didn't have images. The most popular image at the time was just the footprints, because the Buddha walks, it's the footprints of the Buddha. That's the book that I'm reading right now, which is an old commentary. It's just got 2 footprints on the front cover. That's the ultimate. So at a time like that, how did you remember the Buddha? Well, relics and stupas were kind of a big deal. So there was just this proliferation of stupas. And the symbolism is the square, that first square at the bottom, is earth. This, something you hold water in. So the next semicircle on the top is water. And then they put a circle on top of that. I think it was a circle on top for air and a triangle for fire. And then they put another device that looked more like a jewel on top of that. Ultimately, it looks like a jewel or a little flaming kind of thing. And that's for space or akasha or emptiness, whatever you want to call it, the 5th element, the ether. So if you look at Nepalese stupas, the middle circle, you've got the cube and the semicircle, and then you've got a circle on top of that. That has actually become a cube, a second cube. And if you look at those stupas, you can see 2 eyes. If you've seen those, like the Buddha eyes staring at you, they're actually engraved on that second cube level. And then as you went off into the Far East, the farther east, Thailand, and then on into China and Japan, the circle on top became a semicircle, and you've got these crescents that stack here on top of each other, so you get 7 of those. And these are all, so the pagoda, the tiered pagoda, is actually directly derived from the stupa. It's a form of stupa. So this proliferation of stupas is recognizing the 4 elements, and it's really physical memorials to the Buddha. Now, you run out of artifacts pretty quickly, so then you move to putting the text in a stupa. The Diamond Sutra goes in the stupa, rather than an artifact or a relic. And if you think about this, in the Mahayana tradition, we've got the Trikaya, the 3 bodies. And there are, in some traditions, actually, this is a Zen chant. It's an extract from a Zen chant. It's an extended version of the real chants. So it's Vairocana Buddha, pure Dharmakaya, Lokana Buddha, pure Sambhogakaya, Shakyamuni Buddha, pure Nirmanakaya. And it goes on, Maitreya Buddha needs to be born. All Buddhas throughout space and time. But you've got different Buddhas for each of these realms. And this is the physical realm. This is like the relative, where it's the desire, where we get hurt, where we suffer. And then the next realm is the form realm, which is the Sambhogakaya. And if you were to do your jhana homework, the form realm is the first 4 material jhanas. Where we're transcending desire, there's still form, but we're transcending desire. And that's where Samantabhadra Bodhisattva shows up and have the realm of action, the form. And then you've got the Dharmakaya, which is the formless realm, the realm of gods, the realm of the absolute. the realm of no thingness. So, where am I going there? Oh, yes. So, and these relate in a way very to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Dharma is form, the Buddha is formless, and the Sangha is desire. Right? I mean, these are just, they're not direct overlays, but they lay up with these three different ways of looking at things. So as the Buddha disappears, the Dharma becomes a representation of the Buddha. The teaching, the book, the text. And this is why in the Lotus Sutra tradition, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, you just chant the title of the Lotus Sutra again and again and again, because the sutra itself it stands in for the Buddha. That's what matters. So we end up with the sutra being proliferated around all these stupas. Stupas are kind of a really big deal. So that's where they come from. So let's go on to section 12. Furthermore, Subhuti, you should know, and we'll circle back to the stupa thing. Let's come back in. Furthermore, Subhuti, you should know that wherever this teaching or even one of its stanzas is kept, that place will be held in reverence by all beings, including gods, devas, and asuras, as if it were the Buddha's sacred temple or stupa. There we go. There's the stupa show. So this is identifying the place where the teaching happens, the place where the learning happens, as being a very special place. And then how much more if someone is able to receive, retain, read, and recite the entire discourse. So this receiving, retaining, reading, and reciting is really important. Receiving is receiving the teaching. You're sitting there and somebody delivers the teaching. Receiving, retaining is obviously holding on to it, and understanding and retaining kind of go together. Reading, so now you've got the book and you sit here and you read the book. And reciting is reciting from memory. So the idea here is of bringing the Dharma into you and then teaching the Dharma, And this is held as a really wonderful thing. I'm not remembering what bits are in here, so I apologize for that. And then in the same set of verses, he talks about having, if sacrificed a life in the morning, and then again in the evening, and then again, millions of lives in the morning, and then again at lunchtime, and then again in the evening, and that's just forever and ever and ever, and that's just, would you not gain great merit? Of course. But if you do this, receive, retain, read, and recite, you'll gain even more merit. So the idea here is that manifesting the teaching, because to receive and retain it and then recite it is manifesting the teaching. And it's not just reading the words. We go to the place where there is nobody receiving this teaching, and yet there is a container held for this teaching. And there's showing up out of this place of no dwelling, because to truly receive the teaching is to get what no dwelling, not dwelling in form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or even dharma. Dharma here meaning objects of the mind. There's no dwelling. And so from a place of no dwelling, what is the most wonderful thing you can do? Well, it's offer the teaching to others. You could offer your life, but the most precious thing is to offer the teaching. The different levels of gift are the gift of the material goods, the gift of the Dharma, and the gift of freedom. And this is the gift, you're offering people the gift of freedom, because this, no dwelling. So, yes, there is an evangelical piece to this, but the most important piece of this is moving into this. What is it? If this is so precious, what is it we are actually receiving, retaining, reading, writing, reciting? What is this? Well, it's the gift of freedom. Um, and it's pointed out by this in the middle of section 13. What do you think, Subhuti? Has the Tathagata ever expanded the Dharma? Well, honored one, the Tathagata has never expanded any Dharma. So we're having this teaching right here. What's he talking about? No Dharma, never expanded the Dharma. What are you doing? You're teaching. But there is no Dharma. It's just as big as it is. It's all the story we're making up. It's a really helpful story because it helps guide us to freedom. But so long as we hold on to this as a story, so long as we hold on to the story, we're missing the point. So the Buddha's teaching is that there is no story, but we've got to have a story to articulate that. So this is when you receive, retain, read, and recite. This is what we're receiving, retaining, reading, and reciting. It's letting go even of Dharma itself, letting go even of teaching itself, letting go even of Buddha, him or herself, itself. And by doing so, we not only are able to say, that's Buddha, that's Dharma, that's the teaching, so forth. We kind of have to say it, but it's saying it from a different place where there's actually nothing there. I'm going to move into the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph on section 14, so you know where I'm going. Subhuti, the Tathagata speaks of the perfection of patient endurance, which is no perfection of patient endurance, and then he goes on to talk about himself being mutilated by the Raja of Kalinga, which all sounds rather brutal, and what on earth is that doing with this? But it makes an important point about this no Dharma. Master Nan Hui Chin, who is the guy whose commentary I've used, and it's the only one I read these days. It's just a great commentary. He makes the point that this sutra is not about emptiness. And if you said it's about the paramitas, he'd say it's not about the paramitas too. He doesn't make a point which is about the paramitas, but he does thread through there the teaching of the paramitas. In several places in here, and the paramitas, this is a Mahayana sutra. In the Pali tradition, there are 10 paramitas. In the Mahayana, there are 6. And they are closely related to the Noble Eightfold Path. They're not the same, but they're related to, they kind of tie together. So there's generosity, that's the first one, which doesn't show up in the precepts. In the Pali tradition, you practice generosity before you get into practicing the precepts. So the first paramita is generosity. The second paramita is sila, which is morality, virtue. So that's right speech, right action, right livelihood. The third one is patient endurance. The fourth one is virya, or effort, which lines up with right effort. The fifth one is meditation, which would also encompass mindfulness in the Noble Eightfold Path, like mindfulness and right meditation. And then the sixth one is wisdom. In one of my favorite books, which is the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, which is the Shantideva's way of the Bodhisattva. It's structured around these 6 precepts. So it's quite common to structure things around these 6 parameters, not 6 precepts, it's parameters. And paramita most obviously translates as perfection. It can mean crossing to the other shore as well. It's one of these bivalent words that can mean many things. So, generosity. Awaken the mind, not dwelling on anything. Practice charity without dwelling in form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or even dharma. This is generosity. Generosity isn't slipping a buck out the window and winding it back up again. Generosity isn't giving somebody something you can afford. Generosity is really about giving things that matter. And deep generosity is giving things that really matter. Giving from a place of no self. There's no me in this giving. There's just the gift to others. So giving without dwelling in form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or even dharma, that is moving to a place of generosity. So we spend a lot of time talking about generosity without calling it generosity. And that's why the first parameter is not the first parameter, therefore we call it the first parameter. Because to start labeling it as generosity, you've got a giver and a receiver and a gift. No giver, no receiver, no gift. There's just this openness, this generosity. The second one, the precepts. The teaching is a precept. I mean, there's just our actions, all the virtuous actions that are laced through this, the precept, the virya, the precepts. And then we come to this third one, practice of patient endurance. In the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, which I talked about, which is the word of Bodhisattva, Shantideva talks about how if anybody abuses you, if anybody is nasty to you, if anybody's unkind or tortures or punishes you, that's actually a profound gift. Because if you think about it in terms of karma, what they're doing by their actions is they are creating really bad karma for themselves. So this is going to have really bad repercussions for themselves. But what they're giving you a chance to do is to practice patience. And within that space of suffering and of pain, time slows down, presence, awareness becomes more stable and there. So you've got this gift of this place within which to practice patience and material to practice it with. So that kind of behavior is in fact a great gift in this. And I'm not asking you to go and have yourselves tortured, but hopefully this at least makes some sense. And this shows up in the, I hang out on Friday nights quite a lot with my, with a Sufi group, or a Sufi friend and mixed group. And in that teaching, which is by Bediüzzaman and Sayyid Nursi, there's a chapter in his teachings which is basically about the gift of pain. And it's exactly what we're saying. The gift of pain is time slows down and you become much more present. And you have material to work with to see through the illusory nature of this world. He goes on here to talk about the Raja of Kalinga. And I was free from a notion of ego, personality, being in a life. So when cut me limb from limb and so forth, what I felt was compassion. I didn't feel pain, or I didn't focus on the pain. I focused on compassion. Master Huai Chin talks about this far more articulately than I'm going to, but it's a deep and important point, which is this not dwelling, which is the base of this practice, is not about finding a way to not notice the pain in your leg when you're sitting. Finding a way to dwell in somewhere that's comfortable and kind of switch it off. It's about noticing the pain. It can be excruciating, but not dwelling, just not being caught up in it. So where we go to is there's no self, there's just this pain. So why would I choose to identify with it? That is the same as anybody else's pain. There's any other suffering. And those of us who've been practicing for a reasonably long time, I'm sure you all have similar experiences to me, where things that would have been unbearable are just like part of life now.
Like what?
Like pain in my legs. I mean, there are times when it really does become unpleasant, and it's beyond my capacity to deal with. And so then I have to figure out what to do with that. But I mean, my top of my thighs right now, is if I pay attention to it, they're pretty uncomfortable because I've been sitting here now without moving for over an hour. And I'll be sitting here without moving for another hour, and it's going to be quite uncomfortable. distractions. Something really difficult happens. I can't think of anything right now, but my dad dies. Right? That happened a year or two ago now. And I just sit in the morning and thoughts and memories would come through, and you just sit through it. So things that would be unbearable. And it's not cultivating bravado. It's the practice of non-identification. It's the practice of not getting caught by it. Yes, it's there. And yes, it's really unpleasant. But there's no reason for me to identify with this story. So I don't. Just there. And that allows me more clearly to see the suffering underneath other stories that are out there, which are not necessarily my stories. That's like what. So this is pointing very strongly at undermining one of the misconceptions of this practice, which is it's about leaving this world behind. That this is all illusory, so it doesn't matter. So we just push off from here and go live somewhere else in this la land of emptiness, and then we can come back and we can, like some of these master teachers, these enlightened teachers who have crazy wisdom, they say, well, it's okay. Yes, I was engaging in what you would call sexual abuse, but that's okay because there's no person there and there's no person here, so there's nobody really suffering. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. Because there's a person who thinks they are a person. Of course they're suffering. So this is absolutely not about leaving the world. It's about recognizing the world is not what we think it is and relating to it completely differently. So this practice of the perfection of patient endurance is about being fully in the world, but not being in the world as a being that's getting stuck by the world. It's seeing pain, it's seeing cushions, it's seeing people, it's seeing the PC and everything. They're really there. They're just not what we think they are. And the patient endurance is being with that stuff as it unfolds. And being in with it, on the one hand, with this openness of generosity and the precepts, and on the other side, with the stability and the calm of mindfulness, meditation, and wisdom, insight, really understanding, really seeing, and really being able to connect with suffering. So if we go back from this to the language that permeates this, that permeates the bit I've pulled out, which is about receiving, retaining, reading, writing, reciting, understanding, all those things. That's what that's pointing at. It's not about evangelism around the sutra. The sutra isn't really this. The sutra, what it's talking about, is being an embodied bodhisattva, which is living in the world without getting caught by the world, without getting trapped by the pain in your legs and by the thoughts of your father's death or whatever it is, the traumas of childhood that you never cured, whatever. And being able to be fully in the world in that posture of complete generosity and complete wisdom. Yeah. I think that's enough. So what does that bring up, folks? Questions, comments?
I have a question.
Please.
So when you were talking about not identifying with for example, the pain in the legs, but instead finding another spot in the body that is feeling pleasant, and I guess identifying with it. So for my understanding, that's not very different from identifying with the pain.
I agree.
And so the ultimate is not to identify at all.
Yes.
So is there any benefit necessarily? Is identifying, so flipping identification with something unpleasant with an identification with the pleasant, is that a helpful middle stage? Is it by necessity something that just happens, or can it be avoided?
Some people are able to jump into this. So there are practices, and sort of extreme Zen would be, most Zen isn't practiced this way, but if you find really extreme Zen, it would probably be practiced this way, which is, yeah, don't look at anything pleasant, you're just there. Just drop right into it, let go of everything. Right now, just let go of everything. You're holding on to it, let go. This is the Dogen. Well, just let go of everything, just let go of everything. Most people, and the vast majority of people, can't jump all the way in because there's stuff that's really, really tough and we can't just let go of it. So we've got to train ourselves. It becomes incremental training. The absorptions, we're settling into meditation as we get more stable and not, experiences of non-duality and peace start showing up. As we settle into those, there are within that, for most people, some fairly pleasant physiological sensations. The first jhana of the four material and then the four immaterial. The first jhana is vitaka and vikara, which are applied in sustained thinking, in mental or analytical, mental investigation. And then there are these two words, piti and sukha. Sukha is pleasure, which is like it's a very gentle pleasure. It's like the wind when you're jogging, or the sun when you're sunbathing, or when you can do certain things with breathing that brings pleasure. It's very gentle, calm pleasure. It's really very nice. Piti is called joy, can also be translated as rapture, and it can be utterly overwhelming. And it just happens, right? And it can be like a kundalini rush, or like some really rich sexual arousal. And it can be just like it's a really, really heavy thing. So these just show up as you're meditating, and then they settle down, and they become more. So the reason for that is it starts off with this really vigorous piti, and then it settles down. That goes away, and you settle down into this sukha, which becomes more and more gentle. So those are pleasant things that help us. They're like substituting the gross pleasure of a bowl of ice cream with something that's kind of nice and pleasant. So they keep us going through this process. They encourage us to come back to the cushion. So as an interim measure to keep us to encourage us in our practice, to keep us going, yes, these pleasant experiences can be really helpful. And as Tanisara Bhikkhu does, learning how to work with these pleasant sensations, seeing where they are in the body, how they move in the body, how we can shift them in the body, how we can help them expand, how we can manage them. That can also be very useful, cultivating insight, understanding how this works.
For example?
For example, if you find, when you're sitting, after you've been sitting typically 15, 20 minutes, you may find there is a pleasant sensation somewhere. People typically talk about this on the back of the hands, in the belly, in the heart space. You find a pleasant sensation somewhere. You can bring your attention to that pleasant sensation, and you can breathe into it. And that's energy breathing. It's not air breathing. You breathe into it, and you can kind of help it grow. And you can make that pleasant sensation expand. And that pleasant sensation you can bring to fill the entire body. So you're then sitting there bathing in this pleasure. And then the Pali Canon Buddha talks about these things as being in a cool pool, being submerged in a cool pool with spring water coming in from the bottom, and occasionally a rain shower comes in from the top. Just this very pleasant place to reside, abide. So that's for instance. And these are ways you're understanding and working with this system, and doing so in a way that's pleasant and is conducive to cultivating deeper insight And the deeper insight is really how it works and recognizing there's no me in here. This is just pleasant. There's no one who's experiencing pleasure. It's just pleasure. So at that stage, yes, distracting or deflecting attention from something that's really uncomfortable to something that's pleasant can be really useful. But at the end of the day, it too is a fabrication. It too is something we need to let go of. All of it. Does that help?
Yes, yeah. And I saw when you were first talking about it, I saw Anand, nodding. I'm curious to to hear, Anand, if you have any thoughts about that,
Please,
the changing the unpleasant sensation in the body into something pleasant. I kind of like saw that you were like, yeah, exactly. I don't know if you want to talk about it. If not, that's fine. But
No, no, no. I mean, I'm just trying to. I had another thing I wanted to bring up, but yeah. So, but only thing I questioned was if you are shifting to a pleasant feeling. That's not the patient endurance, right? You're trying to escape from it. So we are losing the opportunity to work with the suffering, right? So we are just that's how I was trying to see this as our opportunity to practice. So the pain, but I know so it's not. You cannot stay with the pain for longer. That's I don't know the balance, right? But yeah, I mean, we all, I guess everyone try to shift towards the pleasant so that you don't need to, continuously go through that pain. I guess that's the natural tendency is that it's not it comes effortlessly, right? So you don't need any effort for that. It's a even without any practice, that's what happens. If there is a pain, we try to shift it to where there is a pleasantness. I don't know if that answers.
So I'll add just a quick thought to this, and then Sally, you had something. In the way I was talking about it, in the way that it's described in the teachings, moving to pleasure in this way, or working with pleasure, it is working with pleasure. Pleasure is not escapism, is not to be used as escapism. I was talking about, you feel these sensations and you breathe into them, you help them grow. You're working with it. Now, that's not patient endurance, but it's working with it. It is investigation. It's not avoidance, like having a bowl of ice cream or going and watching a TV show. And both patient endurance, the word endurance shows up there. Ajahn Chah, several times in his talks, and he doesn't have that many talks, there are about 500 pages of his talks that still are with us. Well,
that's not many.
Well, it's not. When you think he had like a 40-year teaching career, there's like 500 pages of talks. It's really not that many, like 50 talks. Mm-hmm. No, I do that many in a year. It's not that many, really. He says, can you endure it?
The pain.
Whatever, can you endure it? That's practice. Can you endure it? If you can, be with it. And that's patient endurance. Just can you endure it? And it's a question, it's always a question to ask when something comes up. Can you endure it? If so, stay with it. And as Anand says, learn from it. Let's investigate it. What is that? Because there isn't actually any me in there. And a lot of the pain actually comes because we try and contain it. We try and restrict it. We say, let's keep it right there. And it's the separation that causes a lot of the pain. If we're just open to it, its nature completely changes. If it's just pain and we let it through us, its nature completely changes. And then eventually we just don't notice it. And it's not that we're avoiding it. We can turn our mind back to it and say, oh yeah, it's there. But we don't notice it in the same way because it's before us. I understand, I obviously will never, have never had and will never have a child. I've never had to go through childbirth. But I understand from people who have and have done it naturally, as in without epidurals and all the rest, that experience can be just this, there's just this rising, and then there's this sudden level, there's this level at which pain, it cannot be comprehended or dealt with. And so the only thing we can do, and my hair's standing on as I say this because it just feels so true. The only thing you can do at that point is just surrender and let go. And when you do, well, I don't know if you
That's what I'm
you just let go and it changes.
Yeah, that's I was gonna echo what you said.
really?
I think, because I think that's something, you know, I learned from childbirth, without drugs. You know, that the pain gets to the point where you can't shift away from it to a pleasant place because there is no pleasant place. And so something does happen where the pain becomes a thing that you are not, it just is pain.
Yeah.
It is not you. There is no you in there anywhere. And so I've used that teaching that my baby's coming out taught me. When I'm sitting and have a pain, I guess now I've never shifted to a pleasant place. I don't know. It's kind of a good idea. Maybe. But no, I think what I usually do, just, you know, maybe from experience, is just really investigating the pain and focusing on the pain a lot instead of moving away from it. Because if I move away from it, that doesn't seem to work. And it's just the same, like you were talking about, it's kind of the flip side of that extremely pleasant sensation you get when you're sitting, which, you know, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be sitting ever. I mean, it's, you know, I'm just not going to do anything that's there would be nothing to lure me in to sit every day. But it seems like there is that point when you experience that really pleasant sensation. There's part of me that wants to stay there.
Yes.
And it's like a little hook, and it's like, oh, this is nice. You know, it's bliss, really. It's like, I want to stay here. And then it's the same as, that would be the same though as identifying with the pain, but the flip side of it, or the pain still being part of me. So it seems like the same thing to me.
And those happen at the same time, the pain and the bliss?
They can.
I think they do,
They
yeah.
absolutely
I would
can.
say in childbirth,
different
I
parts
think
of the
so.
body?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think in childbirth,
And you
because I mean, to me, just, you know, from my own experience, that it was extreme pain, but it's also the most extreme pleasure.
Yeah.
I felt too.
And
And
this-
it's hard to describe, but I've heard, and it's not, you know, la la land. I've heard other women describe the same thing in different ways, or
And I can tell you the
maybe
same.
other kinds of pain too that other people have
You were
experienced.
too happy to get that baby out,
Yeah.
finally, get rid of it.
But it's something, it's almost like it's something that had to happen before the baby could be born. That unidentified, I don't know. It was
Clay, did you have
interesting.
something?
My whole job is
Yeah, you're right.
taking people's pain away, but by doing it through a pathway of having them focus on it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They come to me and they say, fix my pain, make it better, take it away. And the first thing I do is drop my elbow into whatever's hurting,
Ooh.
right? I mean, that's not really.
Yeah, I know.
No,
No, it sounds good.
It's not far away from what you really.
No, but I mean, you know, someone says I have a pain in my neck and I can't move my head without it hurting. The first thing I do is go up in there and I jam my fingers into it.
Mm,
I apply pressure, right? And I have them breathe into it.
Yeah.
And there's different types of pain, and we have labels for these pain. Yeah.
What, like what?
Like the pain relieving pain, the hurt so good pain is called algedonic pain.
Huh.
It is a pain, alga meaning pain, donic derived from anodyne, meaning something that takes away pain.
Hmm.
It is a pain that takes away pain. And that's just the physical aspect of it. I would argue that my whole life is a practice in algedonic existence. Just because I know I've had several people tell me that I should just kill myself because of my blindness. But my
They
blind,
told you that
oh yeah,
with words?
oh yes,
Like friends of yours?
No, they're not friends.
No.
No, they're people who cannot for the life of them comprehend a life outside of the visual realm. They're people that are suffering,
Mhm.
right? They say these things because they don't know how to say it anything different to themselves.
Mhm.
But that, my blind, I have so many cuts and bruises on me, even right now, from when I walk into stuff or whatnot. It just happens. It's a part of it. But the other side of it is that I get to interact with people and not dismiss them on superficial levels, which has opened up a world of relationships and correspondence with many other things. It is a pain relieving pain. So, we can talk about physical pain, and that's a very accessible avenue because we all know that. But there's several different dimensions of it. So, but yeah, I mean, if you run away from it or try to alter it, that doesn't do anything, right? You can put a heating pad on
Mhm.
for hours and hours, but all that's going to do is dehydrate your tissue and make it worse,
Hmm.
right? But you have to get rid of it, you have to go into it.
Mhm.
And you can't, so that's what I have to contribute.
I'll go back to your question about can these coexist, and I'll just add one thing to that.
Yeah, and my question is, can you focus, bifocus on the pain and pleasure at the same time? Like not single-pointed
sure.
attention, but like two-pointed
Mm.
attention. And then what would that make for your mind?
So I'm going to answer there's two stages to this answer. Stage one, I have many times been sitting in meditation when I've been sitting for an hour or a couple of hours, and I'm really stable, really peaceful. The body, the mind, everything is stable and just really pleasant. And my legs are killing me. And the last thing I'm going to do is move because it's so pleasant.
Mhm.
So they're both there together.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter if you get to it, it just doesn't matter because it drops off. There's nobody there. There's just this pain and this pleasure. And I'm not going to move that. I just stay there.
Mhm.
So yes, absolutely, both at the same time, and you can shift the tension between them. But generally in that place, it's more of a non-dual experience where there's just not a person in the middle of it. There's just the pain and just the pleasure. So holding these two has a different valence because they just are. It's not an intentional holding, they're within the realm of consciousness, the realm of awareness.
Are you aware in these moments that you are equanimous, or is it not equanimity?
So I don't think about equanimity at that time, but yes, I mean, absolutely, equanimity is present at that time.
Mhm.
The other thing I'll say, and it goes back to the feeling turmoil that I know you do, Natalie, where positive, negative, and neutral. And in this same place, I just described it as like excruciating pain, but it's really not. It's just sensation. It's not positive or negative. It's just sensation. It's very strong sensation, but it's just sensation. So it's like Clay's already gone and stuck his elbow in my knees. I mean, it's already transcended. It's no longer pain. It's just really powerful sensation.
Speaking of pain, I just had a cramp.
I know.
Yeah, I'm about to say the same thing. It's more, I just remembered something. The way out is the way in, right? I feel sometimes even, I mean, physical pain is sometimes it's very hard to really work with, right? It's about I think our patient endurance. But there is some insight I had, like, so before I was unable to see the pain as just pain, right? It is my pain, right? So I always see the pain as it's my pain. I did not see the other's pain as my pain, but only my pain as my pain. But if you, as I was working with that, I mean, that's some kind of an insight. I can see that, a pain as just a pain, but not every time, but it happens as I was practicing. So that once you get to that, I think that will a lot of pressure is you get relieved from that. Otherwise, it's bothering your mind always. So, but once you get that insight, you see that pain as just a pain that is off your mind and that bothers less. That's what my experience. Thank you.
Yeah, it seems like we've been talking mostly about physical pain and physical
Yeah.
pleasure. I think it's so much more challenging with difficulties and pain in your life. I don't know, and that's what it's been. The past 3 days, I've been going through a really, really difficult family situation, which I won't go into, but it is quite painful. Lots and as anybody who deals with family, lots of stories, so many stories, resentment and all the terror, all the bad stuff. So, but things need to be done. This needs to be done. So I don't know what I would have done without the practice, I mean, it hasn't been perfect by any means, but, I've really been having to concentrate on this situation and deal with it without without getting so caught up in it, because then nothing would get done that needs to get done. But what we're talking about too, it's kind of, I think it's almost the same thing. Like I had a horrible 3 days, went outside last night, took a walk.
Yeah.
And all of that went away. I looked up and the wind was a beautiful evening with trees. And it was just like, and it was like, this is what's real. This is really it. This, like all that stuff that had happened the past 3 days and that I'm still dealing with, it's not real, but something just like your mind seems to go to the pleasant. Just like and it made me think of effleurage, which I don't know, you probably know about. Well, my daughter told me about it, and it's something like dealing with burn victims who are in terrible pain, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. But if someone just comes in, like tickles their arm very gently, it's like neurologically we're wired, our brains go to that. And instead of the pain, that's what you notice more is the pleasant sensation. And so this seemed almost like that, like my brain went to what was actually more real, I think, than everything I've been dealing with. Does that make any sense?
One of the things that's happened, so just for me, it feels like this is aligned with the shift from the orthopraxy to orthodoxy, the axial age, and moving from when people used to care about how you behaved in the world and living virtuous lives, and now we care about belief systems. We're moving from a world of action to a world of ideas. And this is part of something that happened relatively recently in human history. So we find ourselves living an awful lot in our heads. And as we live in our heads, all of these family traumas and all this stuff just kind of takes over. Part of an enormous amount of what I think we're doing with our practice is we're relearning how to live in our bodies. We're remembering this is what's real and this isn't. So you're probably not aware of this happening, but I'm pretty conscious that part of what's happening in your practice is you're embodying your life. And it's much more natural for you to go into the woods and the open air and to drop back into the physical experience of that and leave the nonsense behind, because the stories are relatively recent stories. So I think this shift to the body is actually a really important part of what we do with our practice. Anand.
Yeah, Sally's, I think, point brought me similar things that I was going through. There are some family things, right? That's not physical, but it is more mental things that I was actually very mindful, even with whatever going on. Glad to the practice. I was very mindful. I can so the I can see the pain of others, other members, and I was, uh, um, it's about with the practice how you, be with fully it, and also to do the most skillful thing, right? That is the challenge, right? So there is, as Gareth just said, we are all living in more all these lot of constructs. There is actually, they are not in the present moment. They're all these big stories, that's creating a lot of suffering. And also the people we are with, they expect, us to do something, but we don't know what that is. That kind of situation, I was dealing with it. And I see one thing is, if we are mindful and if we drop our ego, there is some answer. So it's very easy to ego come into these situations, right? With especially with the all the the dealings that we do with the world, the dramas and all. There is, if we can keep our ego separate, that was really really difficult, in even when I was so mindful, but that was difficult. But I think um, it helped me actually, just keeping the ego. If we are able to do that, that sometimes it was helping. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Right.
I have two things. Um, to piggyback on what Anand and Sally were talking about here. About having the ego wrapped up in pain. I've seen that physically and I see that emotionally. And I keep going back to my work and I'm really sorry.
Yeah, it's,
No, it's good.
it's a great place to learn.
But obviously there's the physical component of things. But when you do this all day, every day, it's very easy to get wrapped up in people's emotional pain as well, because the physical pain is an expression of that. And you get involved deeply in people's physical pain. And whether you believe it or not, you're going to get involved in their
Of course.
emotion, right? That's still, that's, you can't get away with teaching that in school, right now. It's really hard. So a lot of times in my continuing education classes, I have whole hours dedicated to explaining people that if you have a bad service, someone who's just determined to have a bad time, and then you go around walking all around all day saying, I'm sad, you've turned your ego into sad.
Right.
And so what I tell them is that you have to take steps away from this, from saying I'm sad to I am feeling sad, to I am feeling sad right now, but later I will not. And understanding that you can't, it's okay to hold space for it, right? To endure in it. But it's a pitfall to shape your whole identity around it, especially knowing that no emotion has ever lasted forever, and that's a gift. That's point number one. Point number two, which I feel like there is a tie-in here, but what Sally's talking about with effleurage about that tickle, right? We usually assume tickling is a relatively pleasant thing, right? It stimulates the same nerve cells as pain. Ticklishness, a tickle is a mild form of pain. It's an early warning system. So my question is, in terms of mental and spiritual components, what we find tickling, is that just a warning for something that could cause us great pain? Is that something that we're also easily mistaken? Because we have a physical manifestation of that built into our skin.
Um,
I guess I want to know what you define as mental tickling.
Well, I think now we're getting into things that are really
Mhm.
personal, but I would guess things like, I've had a really hard day. I really just want to watch a bunch of true crime stuff.
Mm.
And that feels perhaps good in the moment. But
Mhm.
if we are what we think and we consume, manufactured violence, all of a sudden we turn around and we see a world that's more violent than
Mhm.
perhaps it really is.
Mhm.
So that's perhaps what I have in mind, but I'm curious as to other people's thoughts.
I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to bring that in the same realm as the feeling tone work, because it really is. Our practice, is about paying attention to things, recognizing that whether we think something is pleasant or painful is actually just a choice. It's simply a choice. It's a conditioned choice, but it is a choice, and we have the ability to completely change that perception if we work at it. Completely undo that wiring. So, and they are all just, whether it's physical or mental, they're all fabrications. They're all things we make. They're not real per se. They're things that arise and we feed. So the practice is about seeing these clingings and cravings, which is what they are: pleasure, pain, like it, don't like it, like you, don't like you, whatever it is, they hold on, push away. Seeing these things before they rise to that level. So whether you call that spotting a feeling tone and letting the feeling tone go before it becomes a craving, or whether you call it spotting a tickle in a very early stage, because you described what you meant by mental tickle, and I think you're already, what you're describing there, you're already beyond what I would call a mental tickle. The mental tickle is that first flutter in the mind before it's taken shape. There's just an energy arising that wants to crystallize, and if you look at it or you feed it, you give it attention, it becomes a thought about a bowl of ice cream or some gratuitously violent TV show, whatever it is. It's not yet there earlier on. So if you can see it early, you can head these things off or not get caught up in the stories. And that's what our practice is about. And it's not becoming a zombie, but it's recognizing that a lot of these tickles, they're not going to a good place. So there's really no reason to feed them. There's every reason not to feed them. So we just look away. We don't give them any energy. And some of those tickles, they're going to become good energy, like what you do for your livelihood, Clay, for instance. Yes, we let those happen. We let those arise, but those are arising without a me in the middle of it, without a sense of an ego, personality, of being or life. They're just arising. And because of the way we relate to them, we will let them arise and then let them subside. We don't get stuck in the middle of them. They just do their job and then we let them go. Does that answer the question? Well, much more of the sutra that we haven't talked about yet, folks.
Really?
Anything on stupas or reading, reciting?
Well, stupid, they're so stupid.
Oh, go ahead.
Anand had his
Go
hand
ahead,
up.
Anand.
Anand and then Sal.
Yeah. So regarding reading, writing, and reciting, all of that, think sometimes it can become dogma, right? So if that is what I'm sometimes worried about, right? That is, it became dogma in many cases. So it's missing the point, and just you're doing the reading, reciting, and doing all that. But actually, it's as understanding what is Tathagata, right? So you're missing that and doing all of that. That's what it's doing. This, I think, the sutra, while we're reading, we said like we need to do many times, right? So we have to continue to do that. But the way I understand is, even though it's told on that, the way it is told is like based on the times that was the time that was told, or the way the people are understanding. But I think the point, I don't know if it is about the experience, right? It is about I think mindful of that experience and mindful of that that embodiment, rather than actually reciting the sutra. So that's what I wanted to.
Yes.
Okay.
You're right. It's a very good caution on it. It can all become dogma very easily if you're not careful. It is absolutely, as you say, about embodying. So
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think the experience of, I haven't been here in person for this. For the Diamond Sutra, I think I came the first time we recited it. And none of us knew at all what not that it's perfect now, but I would just like to say it was really different, and I really enjoyed chanting with other people in the room. It was instead of by myself, and I know, I mean, I have to come on online a lot of the time now, but if you can possibly come here again and chant it with other people in other bodies, it's worth it.
yeah, I mean,
It's a completely different energy.
and it shifted dramatically when Natalie walked in.
Yeah, exactly. It was
and
me and you,
just an extra
yeah,
voice.
especially when you
There
think,
was
yeah.
extra voice,
yeah.
and with three of us,
Yeah.
it was just.
And with the
yeah.
breathing, we were talking about like having to stop for breaths, you know, having 3 people made that. So anyway, that was just a really wonderful experience.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
It was that also too. Claire.
In terms of reading, reciting, and retaining, I have to do all that very differently.
Absolutely.
Obviously. So for me to recite it, I first must retain it. Because I won't have, I have to memorize everything.
Mhm.
So my thought is, if I'm going to memorize it, I might as well memorize it in its original, in its original language, right? Because it'll take just about as much effort on my part. And it's much shorter, isn't it? When it's
So there's a question about what its original language is, because most of the time it's chanted. It's most of these sutras. There's the Chinese version, which is the Kumarajiva translation, but they were originally written in an Indian language, probably Sanskrit. But a lot of the original Sanskrit's been lost and been translated back from Chinese to Sanskrit. So what actually is the original language?
right.
It's a very difficult question, because what is the point of chanting anyway? At one level, there's no reason to memorize anything. You could just chant the New York Times, the New York Times, the New York Times, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola. And if you're doing it with the right intention, it doesn't matter. It's like, well, I want to translate the original language where you don't understand what it means, but I'm doing it with intention. So at that level, it doesn't matter. If you want to chant it with words, so I now find, being a personality, an ego personality being in a life just shows up. Not dwelling on form, sense, smell, taste, touch, or even time, just shows up. These are phrases that are now embodied, and they're just available. So having that accessible as English is useful, because it's now an understood language that becomes part of this broader vocabulary. So I'm not giving you a real answer, but I'm broadening the question, I think, I hope. It's my intention to broaden the question. And when it talks about reciting, it is absolutely talking about reciting from memory. Reading is reading from the text. Reciting is about reciting from memory. And it comes from a time, of course, where people didn't have texts around all the time, so they had to memorize, and were much more adept at doing so.
So is the Chinese version short?
It is shorter. You talk to Benjamin about it, and the Benjamin will tell you, this takes me 35 minutes to chant. He says it would take 10 or 15 minutes to do the Chinese version.
Now that I can do.
Except you pronounce it phonetically appallingly. Because it's a musical language, right?
Yeah.
It's an internal language.
Tonal.
Sally,
So does chanting it the way we do so fast, does that help us keep it from becoming dogma? Because you can't get stuck anywhere.
Mhm.
It's just like, I mean, it's even more, this is even more so than the Heart
Yes.
Sutra, you know, you
well,
can't
I'm really
stop.
pushing it too
You
far.
can't
Keep
cease
stopping.
on any one word or phrase, yet as you say, yeah, something came, I don't know, I can't remember what it was, but I was walking around the other day, wandering around and something popped in my head, and
Yeah.
that happens with the Heart Sutra too, you know, even though you're not stuck, so I really like that fast.
I think two things I say
It's
about it.
helpful.
One is, yes, chanting it fast, I think helps.
Mhm.
Also doing so frequently,
Mhm.
doing so frequently.
Mhm.
It's like you read, what's the book you read every 10 years?
I have two,
Anna Karenina.
well, yeah, and Middlemarch.
Middlemarch,
Yeah.
okay.
Both of
Um,
those.
But the meaning changes every time you
Yeah.
read it, it's different.
Absolutely.
And you probably have phrases from those books that are resonant in your body, and they're available. And they don't have any particular meaning, except when a circumstance arises, which brings them forward. So I think if chanting is just an expression of memorizing, then the real question is what's going on with memorizing? And to me, the memorizing is like, yeah, I've trained my body so I can run a marathon, but it means I can also work in the yard better. You know, they're just tools. Wherever you are, they're just tools. Back to Anand's, you've got to be careful about document, but I think it's just real value. So Anand and then Natalie.
Yeah. One thing it helped me the way we are chanting fast. It helped me to get the concentration. So concentrate and trying to understand what the point is. That is what I see. It's more useful to me. And language is definitely important, right? Language that I understand this versus the language, in the original form. The original language that is good. It has a different, um, you know, depending on what chanting. Some are their energy is in the way you chant, and with even like some of the Indian like Sanskrit chantings, there is some energy in the way you chant, right? That you don't get that energy any way. So I have seen that, experienced that in those cases. Some of those chantings, they need to be chanted in the original way, because that the tone itself is special, I think. But this one, Diamond Sutra, I think that helped me to focus and concentrate, because I'm a slow reader sometimes. um, I think that's what I just wanted to share that.
And this whole, what language to learn and read in is a compromise, right? I mean, I can also, at one point, I could do most of the following. Kanji, Zaibo, Zatsugyojin, Hanya, Hara, Mita, Jisho, Kengo, Onkaiku, Do. That's the Heart Sutra it's not actually Japanese, but it's the Japanese version, but it's many of the words are transliterated. So Makahanya Prajna is Maha Prajna, Makahanya Paramita, Prajna Paramita. Right? So it's transliterated, and then there are Chinese words in there as well. But that's very traditional, and that it's been done for a couple of thousand years that way. It's just got a certain energy. Now,
Yes, an observation about section 24 that says that should a person bestow in charity an amount of the seven treasures as great as the Mount Samaras, in the worlds of the galaxies of the universe put together. And should another person receive, retain, read, and recite even a single stanza and expound it to others, the merit of the former could not be reckoned as 100, 1,000, even 100,000 of the latter. So this is, and this, you know, this is not just one like instance. In many of the other sections, the same message is
Yes,
repeated
absolutely.
again and again. It's like the message of, you know, don't be a jerk and just like want to get, you have to give. And so, you know, like it's really interesting how this is repeated over and over again, you know, like just
Yeah.
stuck on people's heads. The same thing happened when I was at the Goenka retreat. At the end, there was so much effort put on the fact that how much more merit somebody gets by being a server
Yeah.
for the retreat than just going and paying to be a student in the retreat. And the service is so much more worth, like just the same kind of message. Like, why? I mean, like, we are naturally selfish. And so the waiting list to become a student for Goenka is like literally, you know, 5 minutes after opening of the sign-in period, enrollment, it's gone. And for the servers, they often have to like start calling people and like, we don't have anybody for tomorrow. Can you please come? I mean, the difference between one and the other is such an enormous difference. I'm not surprised that this is like repeated again and again and again. It's like, and basically just, I mean, lying to people that this is like so much more beneficial if you do this versus that. And it's not really, it's, I mean, what it is, it's more beneficial for you if you don't do that, if you don't waste your time, if you just continue with your own practice and get even better. But for other people, it's more beneficial.
Yeah. And for some
So-
people, actually, for some people, it is more beneficial to move into
If you
that
didn't
service.
learn it well,
Yeah.
when you teach it, you can learn it better. But if you learn it well, so I mean, that's not surprising that this is just, you know, they're hit on the head time and time again, you know, it's so difficult to get out of this, you know, like mindset of going after what really is, you know,
Yes.
attractive to us.
I mean, there in all of this stuff that I've used this week, there's a heavy thread of proselytizing.
Yeah.
There really is. And underneath it all, there is a very serious message if you want to get into the real message, because what you just read, read, receive, retain, read, and recite the same meaning of the words with the verbs we talked about. Even a single stanza of this Prajna Paramita Sutra. What is this Prajna Paramita Sutra? It is embodied wisdom. It's not just generosity, it's actually living a life of embodied wisdom. So you know, there is the transcendent, this is a layered message, and there it really is this transcendent version of it in it. Coming back to that, but yes, you're right, there is the proselytizing. There really is. Charles, you've been very quiet today, sir. I hope that's not just because you can't figure out how to come off mute. We can't hear you because you are on mute, so you've got to press the button. Or you've got to yell to Charlotte to come and help you. There you go.
How's that? Okay. Okay, well, I've been quiet because I haven't been able to formulate any. Actually, I got quite lost at the very beginning.
Oh dear.
Totally, at the very beginning of the sutra, and I spent the whole sutra trying to catch up, or trying to get ahead of it so that the sutra would catch up with me, or I couldn't figure out what to do. So that's basically it. I've been just sort of I just been trying to take it all in. I'm glad to be with you and with the group. That's wonderful. But I got totally lost in the sutra. I got totally lost in the first 3 words, I guess. I don't know.
So that's, as Sally said, come and join us, because if you'd done that, somebody would have picked up their page as Sally did with Natalie and said, right here.
No.
Well, sorry you got lost. Glad you were with us, Charles. Does anybody have any last thing from Clay? Because we're right at time. So last thing.
What are you gonna do with all this merit that you've accumulated by expounding?
What does one do with merit? To the extent I've accumulated any, what does one do with merit?
Yeah, you
Put in
got,
the
you
bank.
got hundreds and thousands of.
Give it away.
Give it
You
away.
give it away.
mountains of it.
Uh-huh.
You give it all away. We dedicate the merit of this practice to all beings throughout space and time. May they be relieved from suffering, from the causes of suffering, and move quickly onto the path to awakening and onto awakening itself. That's what we do with the merit play. Thank you. Class dismissed. Hope to see many of you tomorrow.